The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the windows of St. Mary's Hospital when Dr. Claire Bennett pushed through the main entrance. She checked her watch. 6:30 in the morning. Perfect. She had a few hours before the official welcome ceremony scheduled for noon, and she wanted to use that time wisely. Claire had spent the last 15 years working her way up through some of the country's toughest hospitals. From a small community clinic in Detroit to a major trauma center in Chicago, she'd seen it all. Now at 42, she was about to start her dream job as chief medical officer of St. Mary's. But she didn't want her first impression of the place to come from a carefully orchestrated tour and rehearsed presentations. She wanted to see the real hospital, the one that existed when nobody was putting on a show. That's why she'd dressed down today. Jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a plain navy sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried nothing but her phone and a small notebook. To anyone looking, she could be a visitor, maybe a family member of a patient, and that was exactly what she wanted. The emergency department was already buzzing with activity. Claire walked slowly through the waiting area, observing everything. An elderly man sat in the corner, his face twisted in pain while he waited. A young mother tried to calm her crying toddler. The registration desk was backed up with at least 7 people waiting to check in. She made a mental note. They needed more staff at intake during morning hours. Moving past the waiting room, Claire found her way to the main corridor that led to the treatment areas. The walls needed a fresh coat of paint. Several ceiling tiles showed water stains. Not terrible, but not great either. She pulled out her notebook and started jotting things down. As she walked, she noticed the nurses' station ahead. 3 nurses were gathered there, talking in hushed voices while staring at a computer screen. Claire moved closer, staying out of the way but positioning herself where she could observe their workflow. From what she could see, they were using an outdated electronic record system, the kind she'd pushed to replace at her last hospital years ago. "Can I help you?" Claire looked up to see one of the nurses staring at her. The woman was probably in her late 40s with blonde hair pulled back tightly and sharp blue eyes that didn't seem particularly friendly. Her name tag read Patricia Hayes, RN. "Oh, I'm just waiting," Claire said with a polite smile. It wasn't a lie. She was waiting for the right time to reveal herself. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Waiting for what? Are you here to see a patient?" "Not exactly. I'm just observing for now." The other nurses had turned to look now. Patricia crossed her arms over her chest. "This is a restricted area. Family members need to stay in the waiting room unless they're called back." Claire kept her tone friendly. "I understand, but I'm not a family member. I'm actually—" "Then you definitely shouldn't be back here," Patricia interrupted. "This area is for medical personnel only. You need to go back to the main waiting area." Claire took a breath. She could end this right now by simply showing her hospital ID badge, which was in her car. But something about Patricia's immediate assumption, the way she hadn't even let Claire finish her sentence, made her pause. She decided to try once more. "I appreciate your concern about security, but if you'll just let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," Patricia said, her voice rising slightly. "I've been working here for 16 years and I know the rules. Visitors and family members cannot loiter in the treatment areas. It's a safety issue and a privacy issue." A younger nurse standing nearby looked uncomfortable. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then thought better of it and turned back to her computer. Claire felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She'd been in situations like this before. Too many times to count, actually. The assumption that she didn't belong in a professional medical setting. The quick dismissal. The refusal to listen. She'd hoped things would be different here, but apparently, some things never changed. "I'm not loitering," Claire said calmly. "And if you'd give me a moment to—" "Look, I don't have time for this," Patricia snapped. She turned to one of the other nurses. "Call security. Tell them we have an unauthorized person in the ER who's refusing to leave." "That's really not necessary," Claire said, maintaining her composure despite the heat rising in her face. "I'm happy to wait for the supervisor if—" "I am the senior nurse in this department," Patricia said loudly. Several people in the hallway had stopped to watch now, "and I'm telling you that you need to leave. If you have a complaint, you can take it up with patient relations, but right now you're violating hospital policy." Claire looked around at the growing crowd. A few staff members looked away when she made eye contact. Others stared with curiosity. No one spoke up. No one questioned Patricia's actions. They just watched in silence. "Fine," Claire said quietly. Call security. Patricia seemed almost satisfied by this. She grabbed the phone at the nurse's station and spoke into it with authority. This is Nurse Hayes in the ER. We need security at the main nurse's station. We have a situation with an unauthorized individual. The wait for security felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 3 or 4 minutes. Claire stood there, her notebook still in her hand, watching as the normal business of the hospital continued around her. Patients were wheeled past. Doctors called out orders. Machines beeped. And through it all, Patricia kept a watchful eye on her, as if Claire might suddenly make a run for it. When the security guards arrived, both looked young, probably in their mid-20s. One of them, a tall guy with a friendly face, looked confused. "What's the problem here?" he asked. Patricia pointed at Claire. "This woman has been asked multiple times to leave the treatment area. She's not authorized to be here and she's refused to comply." The security guard looked at Claire. "Ma'am, is there a reason you're in this area?" Claire sighed. This was getting ridiculous. "Yes, there's a very good reason, but apparently no one wants to hear it." "Then maybe you should come with us," the second guard said, not unkindly. "We can sort this out somewhere else." Claire glanced at her watch. It was barely 7:15. She still had hours before anyone would be looking for her. She could end this now, could pull out her phone and call the CEO directly, but part of her wanted to see how far this would go, wanted to see what kind of hospital she was really walking into. "All right," she said. "Let's go." Patricia actually smiled a little as the security guards moved to escort Claire toward the exit. "Next time maybe you'll think twice before wandering where you don't belong," she said. Claire didn't respond. She just followed the security guards down the hallway, past the emergency department, past the waiting room full of sick and injured people, toward the main entrance. Behind her, she could hear the normal sounds of the hospital resuming, everyone going back to their business as if nothing unusual had happened, as if it was perfectly normal for a black woman in casual clothes to be assumed guilty before proven innocent, as if it was perfectly acceptable to dismiss someone without hearing them out, as if this kind of thing happened every day, which Claire thought sadly as she walked. It probably did. The 2 security guards walked on either side of Claire, not touching her but making it clear she was being escorted out. They passed through the main corridor, and Claire couldn't help but notice the stares from staff members and visitors alike. Some people looked concerned. Others looked judgmental. A few whispered to each other as they walked by. "Listen, ma'am," the taller security guard said quietly. "I don't know what happened back there, but Nurse Hayes is pretty strict about the rules. If you just cooperate, this'll all be over quick." Claire almost laughed. If only he knew. "I'm cooperating," she said simply. They were halfway to the main entrance when Claire heard quick footsteps behind them. Wait a second!" Everyone turned. A young nurse, probably in her late 20s, was hurrying toward them. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with her stethoscope. Claire recognized her from the nurse's station, the one who'd looked uncomfortable earlier. "What is it, Bethany?" the shorter security guard asked. The nurse, Bethany, glanced between Claire and the guards. I think there might be a mistake." This woman tried to explain who she was, but Nurse Hayes wouldn't listen. Claire felt a spark of hope. Finally, someone willing to speak up. The taller guard looked interested. "So who is she?" Bethany bit her lip. "I don't know exactly, but she had a notebook and was taking notes like she was doing some kind of assessment. And she seemed really professional. I just think maybe we should check before we—" "Bethany!" Patricia's voice cut through the hallway like a knife. The senior nurse was marching toward them, her face red with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" "I was just saying that maybe we should—" "You were just undermining my authority in front of security," Patricia snapped. "I made a decision based on hospital policy, and you have no right to question it." Bethany's face flushed. "I'm not questioning your authority. I'm just saying she tried to tell us something and we didn't let her finish." Patricia turned to the security guards. This woman refused to identify herself properly and was loitering in a restricted area. I asked her multiple times to leave and she refused. That's a clear violation. Now, are you going to do your job or do I need to call your supervisor? The guards exchanged glances. The shorter one shrugged. "We're just following protocol, Nurse Hayes." "Good," Patricia said. She turned to Bethany. "And you need to get back to work. Now." Bethany looked at Claire one more time, her expression apologetic. then turned and walked back toward the emergency department. Claire felt the small flame of hope flicker out. It was the same story she'd seen play out so many times before. Someone junior sees something wrong but doesn't have the courage or authority to really challenge it. Patricia stayed with them as they continued toward the exit, as if to make sure the job got done properly. They walked past the gift shop, past the coffee stand, past the information desk where a volunteer looked up with mild interest. "You know," Claire said, unable to stay quiet any longer. "You're making a serious mistake," Patricia scoffed. "The only mistake here is yours. You thought you could just walk into a hospital and go wherever you pleased." "Well, this isn't a shopping mall. We have rules for a reason." "I understand that," Claire said evenly. "And I respect hospital security. But you made assumptions about me without giving me a chance to—" "I gave you plenty of chances," Patricia interrupted. "And you were being deliberately evasive. That's suspicious behavior, and I have every right to respond to it." They were at the main entrance now. The automatic doors slid open, letting in a blast of cool morning air. The security guards looked uncomfortable, but they didn't stop moving. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave the property," the taller guard said. "If you need to come back for any legitimate reason, you'll have to go through proper channels." Claire stopped walking. She'd let this go far enough. "And what exactly are proper channels?" "You can call the main hospital number and explain your situation to whoever answers," the shorter guard said. "They'll direct you from there." Patricia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking satisfied. A few other staff members had gathered near the entrance, watching the scene unfold. Claire saw a janitor pausing with his cleaning cart, a lab technician holding a coffee cup, and 2 more nurses she didn't recognize. This was humiliating. Absolutely humiliating. And the worst part was that Claire knew she could end it in seconds. One phone call, one simple explanation. But she was tired. Tired of always having to prove herself. Tired of being questioned and doubted. Tired of people making assumptions based on how she looked rather than listening to what she had to say. "You know what?" Claire said, looking directly at Patricia. "I tried to handle this quietly. I tried to be respectful of your position and give you a chance to correct your mistake. But you didn't want to hear it." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Claire said calmly. "I'm just telling you that actions have consequences, and you're going to have to live with the consequences of your choices today." "Is that some kind of lawsuit talk?" Patricia demanded. "Because let me tell you, I followed hospital policy to the letter. I have witnesses. You were in a restricted area without authorization. You refused to leave when asked. Security will back me up on that." The guards shifted uncomfortably. The taller one cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we really do need you to leave now." Claire nodded slowly. "Fine, I'll leave. But I'll be back. And when I come back, things are going to be very different." Patricia actually laughed. "Oh, I'm sure they will be. You'll probably come back with a lawyer, right? Claiming discrimination or some nonsense. Well, good luck with that. This hospital has dealt with frivolous complaints before." Claire felt something crack inside her. She'd tried to be patient. She'd tried to be understanding. But there was only so much a person could take. "You think this is about a lawsuit? You think I'm some kind of troublemaker looking for a payout? I think you're someone who got caught where they weren't supposed to be and now you're trying to flip the script," Patricia said coldly. "I've seen it before. People come in here thinking the rules don't apply to them, and when they get called out, they play the victim." The small crowd that had gathered was growing. Claire could see more faces now. More people stopping to watch. A doctor in scrubs, 2 administrators in business casual, a woman who looked like she might be from HR. All of them watching, all of them silent. "You didn't even ask me who I was," Claire said quietly. "Not once. You just decided I didn't belong here and that was that." "Because you were acting suspicious," Patricia insisted, taking notes, lurking around the nurse's station, refusing to give straight answers. "What was I supposed to think?" "You were supposed to think that maybe, just maybe, there was a legitimate reason for me to be there," Claire said. "You were supposed to listen instead of making assumptions. You were supposed to treat me with basic respect." Patricia's face was getting redder. "I treat everyone the same way. This has nothing to do with—" "Don't," Claire held up her hand. "Don't pretend you don't know what this is about. We both know." The air felt thick with tension. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the security guards seemed frozen, unsure of what to do next. Then Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "You're right. This does have to do with something. It has to do with people who think the rules don't apply to them. People who think they can go wherever they want without consequences. Well, not in my hospital. Your hospital? Claire repeated softly. Yes, my hospital. I've been here for 16 years. I've earned my place here, and I'm not going to let someone like you undermine that. Someone in the crowd gasped. The woman who looked like she might be from HR had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. Even the security guards looked shocked. Claire took a deep breath. She thought about all the years she'd spent studying, the countless nights working double shifts as a resident, the patients she'd saved, the programs she'd built, the respect she'd earned. And here she was being escorted out like a criminal because one nurse couldn't see past her own biases. All right, Claire said quietly. I'm leaving, but mark my words, Patricia. This conversation isn't over. Not by a long shot. Claire was just about to step through the automatic doors when she heard a voice that changed everything. Dr. Bennett? Claire? Everyone turned. An older man in a white coat was rushing down the hallway, his face a mixture of confusion and alarm. Dr. Raymond Foster had been with St. Mary's Hospital for 35 years. He was supposed to retire next month, which was the whole reason Claire had been hired. She was supposed to be his replacement. Raymond, Claire said, relief flooding through her. Dr. Foster reached them, slightly out of breath. He looked at the security guards, then at Patricia, then back at Claire. What on earth is going on here? Why are you being escorted out? The welcome reception isn't until noon. I thought you'd gone to get breakfast or something. The taller security guard's face went pale. Dr. Foster, we were just... Nurse Hayes called us about an unauthorized person in the ER. Dr. Foster's eyebrows shot up. Unauthorized? He looked at Claire, understanding dawning in his eyes. Then he turned to Patricia. Nurse Hayes, do you know who this woman is? Patricia's confident expression was starting to crack, but she held her ground. She refused to properly identify herself and was loitering in a restricted area. I followed protocol. This is Dr. Claire Bennett, Dr. Foster said slowly, as if speaking to a child. She's the new chief medical officer. She's literally going to be running this entire hospital starting today. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Claire watched as the color drained from Patricia's face. The security guards took a step back, looking like they wanted to disappear into the floor. The crowd that had gathered was completely silent. That's not possible, Patricia stammered. She was dressed like... She didn't have a badge. She wouldn't say who she was. I tried to tell you, Claire said quietly. Multiple times. Dr. Foster shook his head in disbelief. I sent an email to the entire staff 3 weeks ago with her photo and biography. Did you not read it? Patricia's mouth opened and closed. There are so many emails. I can't read every single one. And she wasn't wearing professional clothes or... So you assumed she didn't belong here, Dr. Foster finished. His voice was cold now, disappointment clear in his tone. You made a judgment based on appearance and refused to listen when she tried to explain. More people were arriving now, drawn by the commotion. Claire saw the hospital CEO, Helen Reeves, pushing through the crowd. Helen was a sharp woman in her late 50s, who'd built St. Mary's into one of the top hospitals in the region. She took one look at the scene and her expression hardened. Someone want to tell me why our new CMO is being escorted out by security? Helen's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. The security guards looked like they wanted to die. The shorter one spoke up, his voice shaking. Mrs. Reeves, we were called to the ER by Nurse Hayes. She said there was an unauthorized person who refused to leave. Helen turned to Patricia. Is that true? Patricia was trembling now, but she tried to defend herself. I was following hospital security protocols. This woman was in a restricted area without identification. She was taking notes and acting suspiciously. When I asked her to leave, she refused to cooperate. I didn't refuse, Claire interjected calmly. I tried to explain who I was, but you wouldn't listen. You cut me off every time I tried to speak. Is that true? Helen asked Patricia. Patricia's voice was getting higher, more desperate. She was being evasive. She wouldn't give me straight answers. Bethany, the young nurse who'd tried to speak up earlier, stepped forward from the crowd. Mrs. Reeves, if I may. Dr. Bennett did try to explain. Several times, but Nurse Hayes wouldn't let her finish. Patricia whirled on her. You stay out of this. No, let her speak, Helen said firmly. She looked at Bethany. What did you witness? Bethany swallowed hard but continued. Dr. Bennett was at the nurses' station taking notes. Nurse Hayes approached her. and immediately assumed she was a visitor. When Dr. Bennett tried to explain, Nurse Hayes kept interrupting and wouldn't let her finish a sentence. Then she called security without ever actually asking for identification or giving Dr. Bennett a real chance to explain who she was. She could have shown a badge, Patricia argued weakly. I don't start officially until today, Claire said. My badge is being made. It's waiting in HR along with my parking pass and building access card. Raymond can confirm that, Dr. Foster nodded. That's standard procedure for incoming executives. I don't get my final things turned in until my last day next month, and Claire doesn't get hers activated until her first official day, which is today. Helen looked around at the gathered crowd. Hospital staff, visitors, patients who'd wandered over to see what was happening. Everyone was staring. This was not the first impression anyone wanted for their new chief medical officer. Dr. Bennett, Helen said, turning to Claire. I cannot apologize enough for this situation. This is absolutely unacceptable. Claire nodded slowly. She could see Patricia was shaking now, probably realizing just how badly she'd messed up. Part of Claire felt angry, humiliated. But another part of her felt something else. Sadness, maybe? Or disappointment. Because this wasn't really about one nurse making one mistake. This was about something much bigger. Mrs. Reeves, Claire said carefully, I think we need to talk about what happened here, but not in front of everyone. Helen nodded quickly. Of course, my office. Right now, she turned to Patricia. Nurse Hayes, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Go collect your personal items and leave your badge at the security desk. Patricia's face crumbled. Please, Mrs. Reeves, I've worked here for 16 years. I made a mistake, but I was just trying to... You were just trying to do your job? Helen's voice was sharp now. Your job is to ensure patient safety and maintain a secure environment, yes. But it's also to treat everyone with dignity and respect. You failed at that today. But I didn't know who she was. That's exactly the problem, Helen said. You didn't know, so you assumed the worst. You didn't ask questions. You didn't listen. You just decided she didn't belong and acted on that assumption. Dr. Foster spoke up. Patricia, I've known you for years. You're a good nurse. But what you did today wasn't just a procedural error. You made assumptions about Dr. Bennett based on how she looked, and then you refused to hear her out. Tears were streaming down Patricia's face now. I didn't mean... I wasn't trying to be. I just thought... That's the problem, Claire said gently. You thought you knew without actually knowing. You saw someone who didn't fit your idea of what a doctor or hospital executive should look like. And you decided they must not belong. Patricia looked at Claire, and for the first time something like understanding crossed her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. The crowd was still watching, still silent. Claire could see different expressions on different faces. Some people looked horrified. Others looked uncomfortable, like they were thinking about their own assumptions and biases. A few looked defensive, like they were already preparing arguments for why Patricia's actions were justified. Helen turned to the security guards. You two report to your supervisor immediately. You'll be written up for this, but I understand you were responding to a call. We'll discuss proper procedures for situations like this. The guards nodded quickly and hurried away, clearly grateful to escape. Helen then addressed Dr. Foster. Raymond, please take Dr. Bennett to my office. Get her some coffee, some water, whatever she needs. I'll be there in 5 minutes after I deal with some of this. Dr. Foster nodded and gently touched Claire's arm. Come on, let's get out of here. As they walked away, Claire could hear Helen's voice behind her addressing the crowd. Everyone, this incident will be reviewed thoroughly. But let me be clear, St. Mary's Hospital does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We will be implementing additional training and new protocols to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. Dr. Foster led Claire through a side hallway, away from the staring faces and whispered conversations. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Finally, as they reached the elevator, Dr. Foster broke the silence. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Claire leaned against the elevator wall as they rode up to the executive floor. It's not your fault. Maybe not directly, but I've been here for decades. If this is the kind of culture we've built where someone can treat our new CMO like that, then I failed somewhere along the line. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into the quiet, carpeted hallway of the executive offices, so different from the chaos of the ER. Claire thought about what had just happened. About Patricia's face when she realized her mistake. About Bethany trying to speak up. About all those people who just watched in silence. This wasn't how she wanted to start her tenure at St. Mary's, but maybe, just maybe, it was the wake-up call this hospital needed. Claire sat in one of the leather chairs in Helen's office, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. She hadn't taken a single sip. Dr. Foster sat across from her, looking older than he had just an hour ago. The energy and excitement they'd both felt about this transition had been replaced by something heavier. Helen arrived exactly 5 minutes later, just as she'd promised. She closed the door behind her and sat down behind her desk, taking a long breath before speaking. "First things first," Helen said, looking directly at Claire. "What happened this morning was completely unacceptable. You were disrespected, humiliated, and treated as if you were a threat rather than a colleague. On behalf of St. Mary's Hospital, I apologize." Claire nodded but didn't speak yet. Helen continued. "Patricia Hayes has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation. Depending on what we find, termination is very likely. The security guards will receive formal write-ups and additional training, and we need to discuss how we move forward from here." "What does the investigation involve?" Claire asked. "We'll interview everyone who witnessed the incident. We'll review Patricia's personnel file for any similar complaints or issues. We'll examine our security protocols to see where they failed. And we'll document everything that happened this morning." Helen paused. "I've already called our legal team. They're preparing for the possibility that you might want to pursue action against the hospital." Claire looked up sharply. "Legal action?" "It would be completely justified," Helen said. "What happened to you today was discrimination, plain and simple. You were profiled, assumed to be somewhere you didn't belong, and removed from the premises. If you want to sue, frankly, you'd have a strong case." Dr. Foster shifted in his seat. "Helen, I don't think Claire wants to start her first day by suing the hospital she's supposed to run." "I'm not talking about what I want," Helen replied. "I'm talking about what's right. Claire has every reason to be angry, every reason to take action, and I wouldn't blame her if she did." Claire set her coffee cup down on the table. "Can I ask you both something honestly?" "Of course," they both said. "Do you think this was an isolated incident? One nurse having one bad day and making one terrible judgment call?" The silence that followed was heavy. Helen and Dr. Foster exchanged glances. Finally, Dr. Foster spoke. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think it was isolated." "Neither do I," Helen admitted. "And that's what worries me most about this situation." Claire leaned forward. "Tell me what you know. I need to understand what kind of hospital I'm walking into." Dr. Foster sighed deeply. "Over the years, there have been complaints. Not many, and nothing that ever rose to the level of what happened today. But little things. A black physician being asked to show his credentials multiple times in the same day, a Latina administrator being mistaken for housekeeping, Asian doctors being complimented on their English even though they were born here." "And what happened with those complaints?" Claire asked. "We addressed them individually," Helen said. "Talked to the people involved. Reminded everyone about respect and professionalism. But looking back now, I think we treated symptoms without addressing the disease." "The disease being unconscious bias," Claire said. "Yes," Helen agreed. "And I take full responsibility for that. I've been CEO here for 8 years. I should have done more, required more training, created better systems for accountability. But I got comfortable. We have good patient outcomes, good staff retention, good financials. I told myself we were doing fine. Until this morning," Dr. Foster added. Claire stood up and walked to the window. From here she could see the parking lot where her car was still parked, her new badge and access cards waiting inside it. She thought about all the hospitals she'd worked at before. All the times she'd been questioned, doubted, assumed to be something other than what she was. It was exhausting. "I don't want to sue the hospital," she said finally. Helen looked surprised. "You don't?" "No, because suing accomplishes what exactly?" "The hospital pays out some money. Patricia loses her job. Everyone moves on. Nothing actually changes, and so what do you want?" Helen asked. Claire turned back to face them. "I want to understand why Patricia did what she did. I want to know what she was thinking, what assumptions she made, and why she felt so confident in those assumptions that she refused to listen to anything I said." "You want to talk to her?" Dr. Foster sounded skeptical. "Eventually, yes, but not yet. First I want to know about her. Who is she? What's her background? What kind of nurse has she been for the past 16 years? Helen pulled up her computer. Let me pull her file. She typed for a moment, then started reading. Patricia Hayes, 52 years old. Been with us for 16 years, like she said. Started as a floor nurse, moved to the ER 8 years ago. Her performance reviews are consistently good. Patients seem to like her. Other staff respect her. Any complaints? Claire asked. Helen scrolled through the file. 3 formal complaints over 16 years. 1 from 5 years ago about her being rude to a patient's family member. 1 from 3 years ago about her refusing to accept a prescription from a nurse practitioner because she thought it should come from a doctor. And 1 from last year about her questioning a young resident's orders. What happened with those complaints? She was given verbal warnings for the first 2. The third one was investigated more thoroughly because the resident filed a formal grievance. Patricia claimed she was just being thorough and protecting patient safety. The investigation found insufficient evidence of wrongdoing, but she was required to attend a workshop on professional communication. Claire absorbed this information, so she has a history of questioning authority when it doesn't match her expectations. It seems that way, Helen agreed. Dr. Foster spoke up. Claire, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that Patricia isn't a monster. She's not some cartoonish villain who wakes up in the morning looking for ways to discriminate against people. She probably thinks of herself as a good person doing her job. That doesn't excuse what she did, Helen said firmly. No, it doesn't, Claire agreed. But it explains it. And if we want to actually fix the problem, we need to understand it first. Helen leaned back in her chair. So what do you propose? Claire thought for a moment. I want Patricia to be suspended, but I don't want her fired. Not yet. Both Helen and Dr. Foster looked shocked. Claire, Helen said carefully, I understand you want to be merciful, but what she did was serious. If we don't take strong action, it sends a message that this kind of behavior is tolerated. I'm not suggesting we tolerate it, Claire said. I'm suggesting we use it as an opportunity to create real change. Patricia made a terrible mistake, but she made it in front of a lot of people. Those people are all talking about it right now. They're all thinking about it. This is a teaching moment and we need to use it. How? Dr. Foster asked. We do a full investigation like Helen said. We document everything. We make it clear that what Patricia did was wrong and had serious consequences. But then we bring her back after a suspension with conditions. What kind of conditions? Helen asked. Required training on unconscious bias, regular check-ins with HR, a probationary period where any similar behavior results in immediate termination, and most importantly, she participates in a hospital-wide program where we address these issues head-on. Helen looked intrigued. What kind of program? Claire's mind was racing now, ideas forming. A comprehensive initiative, mandatory bias training for every single staff member, regular workshops and discussions, a clear reporting system for discrimination incidents, and a diversity committee that actually has power to make changes. That's ambitious, Dr. Foster said. It needs to be, Claire replied. Because what happened to me this morning? It's happening to patients too. Maybe not exactly the same way, but Black patients being dismissed when they report pain, Latino families being treated like they don't understand medical information, LGBTQ patients facing judgment. If the staff treats their new CMO like I was treated, how are they treating vulnerable patients? The room fell silent as the weight of that question settled over them. Helen's expression shifted from defensive to thoughtful. Dr. Foster looked troubled. You're right, Helen said finally. This is bigger than one incident. And if we're going to address it, we need someone who understands the problem from personal experience to lead the effort. Are you offering me the job? Claire asked with a slight smile. You already have the job. Helen smiled back. I'm just asking if you're willing to take this on in addition to everything else a CMO does. Claire thought about the morning she'd had. The humiliation, the anger, the frustration. She thought about Patricia's face when she realized her mistake. She thought about Bethany trying to speak up but being shut down. She thought about all those people who just stood and watched. Yes, she said, I'm willing. But I need both of your support. This is going to be uncomfortable. People are going to resist. Some staff members are going to think I'm making too big a deal out of nothing. Others are going to be angry that Patricia isn't being fired immediately. We have to be prepared for pushback. You'll have our full support, Helen promised. Absolutely, Dr. Foster agreed. Claire nodded. Then let's start planning. The welcome reception is supposed to happen at noon, right? We can cancel it, Helen offered. Given what happened— No, Claire interrupted. We're not canceling. We're moving forward. But I want to address what happened this morning. I want everyone to hear about it directly from me. Dr. Foster looked concerned. Are you sure that's wise? It's still so fresh. That's exactly why we need to talk about it now, Claire said, before rumors and gossip fill in the gaps. Before people choose sides without knowing the full story, we need to control the narrative and set the tone for how this hospital is going to handle these issues going forward. Helen stood up and extended her hand to Claire. Then welcome to St. Mary's Hospital, Dr. Bennett. I have a feeling your tenure here is going to be very interesting. Claire shook her hand, then Dr. Foster's. Despite everything that had happened, she felt a strange sense of purpose. This wasn't the beginning she'd wanted, but maybe it was the beginning the hospital needed. The conference room was packed. Every seat was taken, and people lined the walls. Claire stood at the front looking out at the sea of faces. Some looked curious. Some looked uncomfortable. A few looked openly hostile. She'd changed into professional clothes now, a navy suit that made her look every bit the hospital executive she was. But she remembered how she'd felt that morning in her jeans and sweater, being marched out like a criminal. Helen stood up to introduce her. Thank you all for coming. I know many of you have heard about what happened this morning. Rather than let rumors spread, we wanted to address it directly. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Claire Bennett, our new Chief Medical Officer. The applause was polite but uncertain. Claire stepped up to the microphone and took a breath. Thank you. Helen, I'm glad to be here at St. Mary's, though I have to admit, this wasn't quite the first day I'd imagined. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, but maybe it was the first day this hospital needed. She had everyone's attention now. This morning I arrived early. I wanted to see the real hospital, not the polished version prepared for a new executive. So I dressed casually and walked through the emergency department. I observed the nurses' station, took some notes, and tried to get a sense of the place. And that's when I was approached by one of your colleagues, Patricia Hayes. Claire saw some people shift uncomfortably. Others leaned forward. Patricia saw someone in casual clothes taking notes near her station. She asked what I was doing there. That's reasonable. But when I tried to explain, she didn't let me finish. She assumed I was a visitor or family member in a restricted area. She told me to leave, and when I tried again to explain who I was, she called security. The room was completely silent now. Within minutes, I was being escorted out of the building. Patricia followed to make sure the job got done. In front of dozens of staff members and patients, I was removed from the hospital I'd been hired to run. Claire paused. The hospital I'd spent 15 years working toward leading. The hospital where I was supposed to start my dream job today. She could see shame on some faces, anger on others. One woman in the back was wiping her eyes. Now, I want to be clear about something. Patricia made a serious mistake. She made assumptions based on how I looked, rather than listening to what I had to say. She let her biases override her judgment, and there will be consequences for that. She's been suspended and she'll face a thorough investigation. Claire saw a few people nodding, satisfied with this. But here's what I want you all to understand. Patricia is not a villain. She's not a bad person who woke up this morning planning to humiliate someone. She's a nurse who's been here for 16 years, with good performance reviews and patients who appreciate her care. She made a mistake. A big one. But it's a mistake that reveals something much bigger than one person's actions. She had their full attention now. How many of you have ever made an assumption about someone based on how they looked? Been surprised when the doctor turned out to be a woman? Assumed the person in scrubs was a nurse instead of a physician? Thought someone couldn't afford treatment because of how they dressed? Hands didn't go up, but Claire saw recognition in many eyes. We all have biases. Every single one of us. They're built into how our brains work, formed by our experiences and what society teaches us. The question isn't whether we have them. The question is what we do about them. Claire moved away from the podium, walking closer to the audience. I've been a doctor for almost 20 years. I've been mistaken for a nurse more times than I can count. I've had patients refuse treatment from me because of the color of my skin. I've had colleagues assume I got my position through diversity quotas rather than merit. I've had security follow me in hospital parking lots, assuming I didn't belong there. She could see people processing this, some looking shocked. And you know what the hardest part is? It's not the people who are openly racist or discriminatory. Those people are easy to spot and deal with. The hard part is the good people, the well-meaning people who would never think of themselves as biased but who make assumptions anyway. The people who stand by and watch because they don't want to make waves. The people who see something wrong but convince themselves it's not their place to speak up. Bethany, the young nurse from that morning, was sitting in the third row. Claire made eye contact with her. This morning, one person tried to speak up. One person saw what was happening and tried to stop it. She was shut down immediately and told to get back to work. But she tried, and that matters. Bethany's eyes filled with tears. Moving forward, St. Mary's is going to be different. We're implementing mandatory bias training for every staff member, not the kind where you sit through a boring presentation and sign a form. Real training that challenges us to examine our assumptions and change our behavior. Some people looked skeptical. Claire expected that. We're creating a clear reporting system for discrimination incidents, not just for patients but for staff too, and reports will be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. We're forming a diversity and inclusion committee with real power to make changes, and we're reviewing all our policies and procedures to find where bias might be hiding. She returned to the podium. This is going to be uncomfortable. Some of you are going to resist. Some of you are thinking right now that I'm making too big a deal out of one incident, that I'm too sensitive, that we should just move on. Claire's voice got firmer. But I'm not going anywhere, and neither is this initiative. Because what happened to me this morning is also happening to patients. Black patients whose pain gets dismissed. Latino families who are talked down to. LGBTQ individuals who face judgment. Elderly patients who aren't listened to. Poor patients who are treated as less deserving of care. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Healthcare is supposed to be about helping people. All people. And we can't do that if we're letting our biases get in the way. We can't do that if we're making assumptions instead of asking questions. We can't do that if we're more concerned with being comfortable than being right. Claire softened her tone. I know this is a lot to take in. I know some of you are probably wondering what this means for you personally. Here's what it means. Do your job with integrity. Treat every person who comes through these doors with dignity and respect. Question your assumptions. Listen more than you talk. And when you see something wrong, speak up. She glanced at her notes, then looked back up. Patricia Hayes will have a chance to learn from her mistake. After her suspension and required training, she'll be allowed to return to work on a probationary basis. Some of you might think that's too lenient. Others might think any punishment is too harsh. But I believe people can change. I believe mistakes can become lessons. And I believe Patricia's experience can help all of us do better. There was murmuring now. People talking to each other in low voices. But let me be absolutely clear, Claire said, her voice cutting through the noise. What happened this morning can never happen again. Not to me, not to another staff member, and certainly not to a patient. The next time someone makes assumptions like that, the consequences will be severe and immediate. She stepped back from the podium. I'm excited to work with all of you. St. Mary's has an incredible reputation and I want to build on that. But reputation isn't just about medical outcomes and financial performance. It's about being a place where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued. That's the hospital I want to lead. And that's the hospital I believe we can become together. The applause started slowly, then built. Not everyone was clapping enthusiastically, but most people were. Claire saw Dr. Foster in the front row, pride evident on his face. Helen was nodding, already making notes for the initiatives they'd discussed. After the reception ended and people filed out, many stayed to talk with Claire. Some shared their own experiences with discrimination. Others asked questions about the new training. A few thanked her for addressing the issue head-on. Bethany approached hesitantly. Dr. Bennett, I just wanted to say thank you for mentioning what I tried to do this morning. And for everything you said, Claire smiled. Thank you for trying to speak up. That took courage. Don't lose that. 3 weeks later, Claire sat in her office reviewing the new bias training curriculum. The first session was scheduled for next week and she'd be leading it personally. Patricia had completed her suspension and was back at work, quieter than before but determined to do better. They'd had a long conversation in Claire's office, painful but necessary. Patricia had cried. Claire had listened. And slowly, grudgingly, some understanding had formed between them. The changes weren't happening overnight. Some staff members were resistant. There had been complaints, pushback, uncomfortable conversations, but there had also been breakthroughs. Patients reported feeling more heard. Staff members were challenging each other's assumptions. The culture was shifting inch by inch. Claire looked out her window at the hospital parking lot, remembering that first morning. How humiliated she'd felt. How angry, but also how clearly she'd seen what needed to change. Her phone buzzed with a text from Helen. "Board loved your first month report, especially the patient satisfaction scores." "Keep up the good work," Claire smiled. It wasn't the beginning she'd wanted, but maybe it was the beginning they'd needed, and that was enough.